truth that we love ourselves the most. We have the famous declaration in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad that the mother loves the child not for the sake of the child, but for the sake of the joy that the child can give to her. The husband loves the wife not because she is the wife, but because of the joy she can give to himself, and so on. If thus we really love ourselves the most, we may as well inquire what is that in us which we love the most. Let us inquire. In this body equipment, if a choice is given to us to ampute a leg or prick both the eyes, our choice shall be certainly to sacrifice the leg. And that is, if the choice is between an organ of action and an organ of knowledge, our preference will always be to maintain the organ of knowledge and sacrifice the organ of action. Again, supposing an organ of knowledge, say ear, is severely paining due to an ulcer in it, and if the doctor says that by an operation the pain disturbance in our mind can be ended at the cost of the ear, the patient's choice would be to sacrifice the organ of knowledge for the sake of the much more intimate and beloved entity in us, the mind. Certainly, it is now clear the mind is more beloved to us than the sense organs. Friends, have you not known the stories of martyrs who have suffered privations and lived through the agonizing whip of the tyrants only to maintain and to keep up their ideals and ideas? Is it not the story of our own recent history? That story that men born with golden spoons in their mouth threw away in sacrifice all their belongings, renounced their successes in their professions, lived through hell, fire, and lathis, only to maintain their ideas of freedom and liberty. From the above, it is clear that between the intellectual ideologies and the mental sufferings, a cultural man will always choose the satisfaction of the intellect, showing thereby what we love and adore our intellect more than our mind. Thus analyzed, Thus analyzed, we shall conclude deep within ourselves that the very source of life, because of which the intellect, the mind, and the body seem to be potent and active, is the factor most loved by us, because it is the source of our maximum joy, thus, the divine spark that lies hidden in us, for the sake of which we are ready to sacrifice. In fact, all the grosser envelopments about it is indeed, as the Upanishad says, the cause for all rejoicing, and when when the cane stick used by police to control mobs, and when an aspirant, the cause for all rejoicing, and when an aspirant comes to identify himself with that, who can measure the joy that is his? We thus realize the self in us, which is nothing other than the all pervading, all perfect, eternal reality. And yet we see many recent enthusiasts who have, in their interpretations of the sacred Upanishads that and is their discourses upon Vedanta, defined this supreme state as a passive dynamism and a characterless and colorless merger with the supreme. The supreme state of perfection is not a night in which all cows are black, but the stanza insists that it is a positive life of inspired joy. He rejoices samodate. The sum total of all the compliments so far paid by Lord Death to his disciple has come to this culminating statement that the gateway of the temple of truth is wide open for Nachiketas. It means that Nachiketas is a fit aspirant who, even while listening to a discourse upon the Shruti mantras, can realize in an intimate subjective experience what pure consciousness the self is. The gist of 12-13 mantra is beginning of spiritual instructions. Reality so deeply hidden can be experienced through Adhyatma Yoga meditation on the inner self. Verse number 14. Anyatra dharmadanyatra dharmadanyatra smat kruta krutata anyatra bhutacha bhavyacha yattat pashyasi tadvada. Nachiketa said, that which thou seest as other than virtue and vice, as right and unright, as other than cause and effect, as other than the past and future, tell me that. To all the compliments paid by the Guru, the only answer that the disciple knows to give seems to be to repeat his own questions upon his burning doubt once again in different words. To one who is a true seeker, there are no eyes and ears for applause or insults. Single pointed, the seeker knows only to pursue the one idea, the problem of his inquiry, almost unconscious of his surroundings or of the blessings that are showered on him. Nachiketas has ears only for the wisdom reply that will come out of the great Guru. All other talk is to him either meaningless prattle or a dull silence. Nachiketas, the seeker, is here inquiring of his teacher the name of reality. Instead of starting it directly, he is here putting the questions as though it were a confusing conundrum. This is not to confuse the issue, nor is it a futile attempt to show himself to be very wise. On a closer inquiry, it becomes obvious that the three parts of the question, separately and together, point out the vast area that he has covered himself independently during his endless meditations upon the life's happenings which so far had visited him. His inquiry points out to a truth that lies beyond virtue and vice, which is neither the cause nor the effect, and which does not belong to either to the past or to the future. By the term virtue and vice, it would be wise of us to understand that these represent the entire list of pairs of opposites as joy and sorrow, success and failure, hope and despair, health and disease, etc. Truth or the ultimate reality, being one without a second, Advaita, cannot of its very nature have anything to do with one or the other of any conceivable pairs of opposites. Vice has got an existence only with reference to virtue. Light can be recognized only with reference to darkness. Life would be meaningless without death. Thus, if we were to accept that truth is virtue, then that truth cannot be absolute, for it will be limited by the existence of vice also. When there are two things different in their nature, one must necessarily limit the other. For example, a half tumbler of milk, when watered sufficiently to fill the glass, we cannot in truth say that the glass is full of milk. The water limits the milk. Again, if the absolute truth in its pure eternal nature were to have the quality of being virtuous, then truth becomes a substance and so finite and perishable. It is evident, therefore, that behind the words of this question is a volume of thought pursued by a highly cultured intellect sedulously trained in the wisdom of the Shastras. Thus, the question of the Brahman boy to Lord Death was a demand for an explanation of that unknown factor which is eternal and immortal, which in itself is neither virtuous nor vicious, and without which neither virtue nor vice can have any existence at all. The question clearly demands a discussion of the Atman, which is pure consciousness or the awareness in us, and which is the eternal witness beaming to illuminate equally both virtue and vice. The street lamp of its very nature throws a pool of light on the road. Whatever portion is the passing parade comes into that light, gets illuminated so long as it remains within the area lit up. The lamp is a mere witness. The light neither dances in joy when a honeymooning couple passes that way, nor does the light reel in darkness when a reveler passes by, nor does it weep when it comes to illumine a tearful funeral procession, irrespective of the merits or demerits of the scene. The light in its own nature brightens up that which comes within its illuminated arena. Similarly, there is an all witnessing eternal light of wisdom, the divine spark within us, which is the source of all life and light, and by which we become aware of the vice and virtue idea in our mind and intellect. Certainly, this great witness, the Atman, is that which is other than virtue and vice, being itself only a witness. Taking now the second part of the question, let us inquire what is that which is neither the cause nor the effect. Every effect is the fulfillment of a cause, and as such, it is nothing other than the cause itself with reference to another period of time and changed conditions. A seed sown, the cause in time and under certain favorable conditions, becomes the effect, the seedling or the plant. All effects can be reduced similarly to their causes, and yet each time the question would arise, what has caused this cause? Thus, we would arrive at an unending chain, and this difficulty is termed in Sansar system of logic as anavastha dosha regressus ad infinitum. In order to circumvent this absurdity, the God principle, the accepted first cause for the manifested Jagat, is considered by all schools of philosophy as Swayambhu, the uncaused cause, the self caused cause, or the self born. But the question of Nachiketas goes even beyond the God principle or the uncaused. It is accepted as a cause, and a cause has a justification with an existence only with reference to its effects. But the theme of enquiry here, it is to be clearly understood, is of that principle which is neither a cause nor an effect. Thus, by this term also, the Brahman boy is inquiring of Lord Death for the nature of the witnessing light of intelligence, which is the knower of all the causes and effects, himself being neither the cause nor the effect. That is to say, the seeker is questioning that Supreme who is independent of both becoming and time. This is clear from the next phrase used lastly by asking his teacher to explain that which is neither the past nor the future. The Brahman seeker is hungrily asking for instructions upon the nature of the ultimate reality in us, the self of the Atman, which is realizable as pure awareness when we are neither rambling with our hopes and ambitions in the uncertain lands of the unborn time, the future, nor identifying ourselves with a team of ghost like memories recruited from the cremation ground of death, dead moments, months, and years which constitute our past. We become aware of the eternal awareness in us to be ourselves only when we cut away our meaningless chains with the past and stop our dangerous flirtations with the unborn future through the cobwebs of silly hopes, ambitions, and desires. In short, the contents of an immediate moment is eternity or immortality. To capture a moment without the shackles borrowed from the past or the future, and thus to become fully aware of the moment in itself, as such, is the culmination of the pilgrimage of a sadhaka. This is called samadhi, and the experience gained therein is the experience of truth. Nachiketas, now it is clear, must have spent many days and nights pondering constantly upon the happenings about and around him, as well as those within him, the all witnessing presence of divinity, the prompter, the controller, and the regulator of our memories and yearnings. In short, the recognizer of the future and the past, the Atman in us, is the theme indicated by the question. Supremely self confident of his own perfect book knowledge, Shastra Jnan, Nachiketas is carefully warning Lord Death not to repeat what the Shastras have already stated or what he has already heard from his own Guru, but to expound upon that which Lord Death is seeing, yat tat pashyasi, It means, on the whole, that Lord Death is to discourse upon his own subjective experience of truth. That is right. I don't want, said Nachiketas, to know religious duties or merits of their results. Tell me that which is even beyond time and causation. Instruct me in the eternal reality. Verse number 15. Sarve Veda Yat Padamamananti Tapagansi Sarvani Chayad Vadanti Yadichanto Brahmacharyam Charanti Tatte Padam Sangrahena Bravimyo Mityetat. Yama said, the goal word which all the Vedas declare of praise, which all penances proclaim, and wishing for which they lead the life of brahmachari. And goal word, that goal or word I will briefly tell thee. It is Om. Here, the preceptor with this stanza starts his famous discourse, which is the rare core of this Upanishad. To begin with, Lord Death, in brief, summarizes all that he has to say upon that which is beyond dharma and adharma, which is other than the cause and effect, and which is something different from the past and the future. Upanishad itself conforms to a style wherein a redundant alphabet is considered to be a colossal sin, and in such a brief literature noted for superhuman brevity, for maintaining which at places even language has been sometimes sacrificed, we are surely heading to some insurmountable difficulty when Lord Death himself warns us that he is going to be deliberately brief. The word Padam, though it looks so small, has an accepted volume of meaning over which even a textbook can be written. There are something like 22 meanings for this two-letter innocent-looking word, such as way, place, abode, state, footstep, footprints, sign, word, a goal, etc. All the Vedas, meaning all the Upanishads, though they argue differently, point out to the same goal of truth. The 108 Upanishads may be considered as so many arrow marks along the circumference of the same circle, all of them pointing out to the same center. Just as in such a case, geometrically no two arrows on the circumference can be parallel, so too no two approaches belonging to two different Upanishads run parallel, and yet all of them, when produced, meet at the one and the same point, center, the truth. Thus, the goal that is pointed out by all the Upanishads, says Lord Death, is the factor that you are asking me now, and that factor is, in brief, indicated by the pregnant symbol Om. All tapashcharya, all severe and conscious practices of self control are pursued, and long years of studies are undertaken by living with a teacher, a life of sacrifice, surrender, and devotion by seekers only to realize this truth which you are asking for, which in brief is indicated by the Supreme Self as their goal, otherwise, all tapas would be meaningless. Indicated by Supreme Self as their goal, otherwise, all tapas would be meaningless. A close echo of this immortal stanza is heard in Srimad Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, verse 11. And it is also noteworthy that in the Gita we have the second half of this mantra repeated substantially. The reality is hinted at by the significance of the symbol Om, but thereby we shall not say that Om defines truth, for to define truth is to define it. In the technique of self perfection, as conceived by the rishis of the Upanishads, the symbol Om is at once a formula indicating the goal and a patrika, pratika, and a pratika, an idol of Brahman for purposes of worship and saguna with form meditation. However, it is also in way interesting to note that the word Om is not found in the Rigveda or Atharveda but occurs in the Taittiriya Samhita of the Yajurveda. एतदेवाक्षरं ब्रह्म एतदेवाक्षरं परम् एतदेवाक्षरं ज्ञात्वा यो यतिच्छति तस्य तत्. Verse 16. This word is verily Brahman alone. This word is also the highest. He who knows this word obtains verily whatever of the two he desires. Here Brahman means lower or Saguna Brahman, and the higher means Nirguna Brahman. Just as we found in the previous stanza that the word Padam has 22 meanings, here is yet another word Akshara which has something like 14 different meanings. Hence, the very language is called, in its pregnancy of suggestions and free scope of import in each word, as the cultured, the Sanskrit, or the Sanskarita. This is a language which the Aryans, probably by generations of effort and experimentation, evolved for the purpose of explaining to us through its mere wealth of suggestions and suggestiveness the inexplicable absolute reality. To serve the purposes of the spirit of the age, everywhere we find new words coined by each generation. Similarly, in the era of deep meditation and seeking of the self, they too had to evolve a new vocabulary and a fit language to serve their purposes. In fact, through no other language can we so effectively convey the science of the self and the nature of the reality as through Sanskrit. In this stanza under discussion, Lord Death is explaining the worship of the very symbol Om. We have already stated that Om, besides indicating the supreme goal through its significance, also provides the meditator with a symbol or form of the supreme reality. Om is used in the earliest time in Veda as a Psalm, Psalm. Yes, so be it. Meaning, just as the Amen of the Hebrews. Later, this Amen was converted by Saint John as the name of the Lord. The Amen, the faithful and true witness. Similarly, did Om slowly grow in its prominence is a European theory not acceptable to those who have tested its vibrational effects and the divine nature. We have also seen earlier how, in the technique of the Upanishads, selfless worships and sacrifices in themselves constitute the most effective way of raising the inner purity and consequently the intellectual potency of an aspirant. Here in this mantra, we have an unequivocal declaration that the very formula Om is reality, just as the very Shiva Linga is to a devotee the very Shiva Tattva, or as we have in our world, the very crown, even when it is without the bald head of any king, is a symbol of might and royalty. Those who doubt this fact would do well to experiment upon a piece of the India's tricolor in the streets of any marketplace, cursing and stamping it under their feet. If they are not mobbed by a patriotic crowd, it would be because the insulting action was perhaps enacted too late in the night. A Vedantin is not, as is generally believed by the uninitiated crowd, a blasphemer of religion or iconoclast. That he is not an idol breaker is clear from the very fact that in his very Bible, the Upanishads, we are now reading the worship of a symbol, advised and advocated by the all knowing godly Rishi themselves. If at all there is in India any sect that today dances to the mad tunes of some imaginary fanaticism and goes about condemning idol worship, they are doing a great injustice to themselves and to the very science of self perfection. As individuals, the erring ones may be ignored. In our understanding, they are victims of their own ignorance of our great Shrutis. But as regards the sect, it shall deserving among the intelligent and the educated as much respect as the social criminals deserve. Beware of them, shun them, avoid them. The Om symbol is not only an idol representing the absolute reality, but it also represents the relative reality. The worshipper or the meditator can meditate upon it as the supreme or as the relative, and through deep and long meditation, when the meditator comes to discover a personal identity with the very thing the symbol stands for, that is, when he realizes his identity with the symbol, he gains the realm of his identification. If meditator has become one with the meditated, and if to him the symbol is a representation of the apara, Apara Brahma, Hiranyagarbha, or the total mind, he gains that state of existence available in Brahmaloka. If, on the other hand, the symbol represents for the successful meditator the supreme reality, he comes to gain in stages a greater inner purification, a deeper power of concentration, and through long ponderings upon the nature of the self, he gains in the end an identity that I am aham asmi, meaning this I am, obtains verily whatever he desires. In this statement, Lord Death is indicating a truth not accepted as a verified fact, supported by observed happenings in life in the world of modern psychology. As you think, so you become. When the thinking comes to gain the necessary potency, in fact, we have only to wish or desire, and our desire or wish must come true. You may wonder whether the Swami has now gone slightly off his head, since it must be your experience in life that almost none of your desires has ever come true. Friends, he has not yet gone mad, nor is the Shruti a mere textbook of mad ravings of a generation of lunatics. Since the Shruti cannot go wrong, this sadhu, who is only trying to unfold the significances of these mantras, cannot also be wrong. Again, just because there is a Shruti declaration, fire is cold, we shall not handle fire carelessly or put a few glowing coal pieces tied in a kerchief on our head and eyes on a summer afternoon. If personal experience is seemingly against the Shruti words, certainly the Shruti text must be taken to mean and hint at some significance deeper than the obvious word meanings. Why is it then that none of our desires comes to be true? Let us analyze ourselves. We are under a delusory idea that thought is an idle, important happening merely within ourselves. In this misconception is the very seed of our samsaric limitations and sorrows. Thought has godly powers. As each thought sweeps across the mind, its secret potency rises up in front of us as an agent willing and ready to manifest that thought as a reality around us. This is something like the mysterious genie or jinn in Aladdin and the wonderful lamp. Aladdin had merely to rub the lamp, and out came the jinn, who saluted his master, a ready slave to execute any wish the master might express. And we know that nothing was impossible for the lamp's genie. Jinn, a thousandfold powerful, magnanimous, and adorable, is the jinn of the mind that rises in us, a ready and willing slave to execute our thought commands. And yet, friends, you are still asking the same old question with your blinking eyes. But Swami, aren't you mad? You are talking just the opposite of what we are experiencing. Although the gene idea is, we admit, quite an entertaining idea of hope. Maybe we may yet discover the cause of our failures if we are actually failing. As we said before, the adorable spirit of thought, the gene of the mind, rises up in front of us, as it were, with each desire that whistles through our mental plane. With the ending of the thought, the jinn, with faithful anxiety and sincerity, turns upon his heels to sail forth to execute the order given by man's conscious mind. But alas, ere the spirit could take the first step to rush out on his errand, another thought wave of desire has risen up in the inner world, calling the jinn back to take more orders, and at the command of the mind, it revolves round its heels again to face its master. Sad indeed is the plight of this godly agent, the presiding deity of the human mind. This creature of all mind, of all power, is made under our own confusing commands and contradictory orders to stand and whirl like a top, each half of the circle representing a definite command given and the other half showing a definite but vain attempt made by the spirit at its execution. But the desire power does not allow it any chance at all to fulfill itself. A mind tossed by contending thoughts, or a mind plagued by an eruption of pox like desires, is the mind that is weeping over its own impotency. If a single pointed mind can wish for anything to the exclusion of any of her contending thoughts or desires, it shall at once be fulfilled. Yoga, viewed in this sense, is a technique of controlling, conserving, preserving, and directing the mental dynamism through a chosen channel of application. One who is well versed in this technique and has therefore a complete control over the mind is a god upon earth whose wishes become, as they cross his mind, accomplished facts. It is because of our own mad thinking that we are exhausting in vain all our godly potencies within. If you start from your home to the office and on your way allow yourself to be a slave to your own indecisions and thus start walking forward as the thought of duty calls you officeward and backward when the thought of the joys of idle sleep pass through your mind, then even late at night you shall still be walking, having reached neither the office nor the home. The only way to reach the office is to maintain the desire to reach the office constantly in the mind and physically working up to it, ignoring and thus controlling all other dissimilar thought ways. So, to the accomplishments of our desires, and in fact, all of us shall find that to a large extent what we are today is the product of or a fulfillment of our own desires which have gained the required maturity and potency in us. If you are only a typist, you have only desired with sufficient potency to become only a successful typist. If you can desire yourself to become a president of this country with the required consistency of purpose and sincerity of devotion, and maintaining this idea can faithfully work up to it without any contradictory desires reaching your mind to dissipate the mental energies The mind's gene shall carry you ultimately in a flying carpet, and in Delhi you shall sit in that august chair and perhaps regret its pinpricks. We have indulged in rather too long in digression, but if thereby the pessimistic crowd of suicides who form the majority of our sad, desperate, and degraded generation could regain for themselves a little more of self confidence and the awareness of their own potencies that now lie uncultivated and unclaimed within, this sadhu feels that he will be justified in this necessary and deliberate digression. Thus, if a meditator meditates upon Om with a desire to enjoy the subtler joys of Brahmaloka, he gains that plane of consciousness, and if the meditator with single pointed devotion meditates upon Om in a Nachiketa like spirit of seeking and the ultimate and the immortal, he shall certainly become that. Verse number 17. एतदालम्बनं श्रेष्ठम् एतदालम्बनं परम् एतदालम्बनं ज्ञात्वा ब्रह्मलोके महीयते. Most glorious is this support. This is the supreme most support. He who has realized, known this support, comes to be adored, worshipped in the world of Brahmaji, the Creator. Jnane tu kaivalyam. Jnane naiva tu kaivalyam. Jnane naiva tu kaivalyam. By knowledge alone is liberation, is the fundamental Siddhanta of all Vedantins. However, severally we may beat the serpent in the rope all through the night, we can never kill it. But when beam of light is thrown on the rope and thereby we gain the knowledge of the rope, the serpent shall end instantaneously. Similarly, by the subjective experience of the knowledge, absolute alone can be become knowledge absolute alone can be become the eternal and thus reach the peak of perfection and the end of all successes. But here the Upanishad is advising for the benefit of the less evolved ones a discipline of upasana or worship, and it is a clear declaration of the Shruti in this stanza that the successful worshipper reaches the Brahmaloka, the state of Hiranyagarbha, which of course is not the highest. In Sanskrit, Brahmaloka can be milked to yield two meanings as Brahma Rupi Loka, a world of the nature of the self, or as Brahmani Loka, the world of the glorious Brahmaji, the Creator. The worshipper, Upasaka, through his actions, karma, ensures only his entry into the world of the Creator, while the one who meditates upon the significances suggested by the symbol Om, knowing or realizing his own personal identity with that truth, through this knowledge, jnana, identity with that through his knowledge known, becomes the Absolute Himself. Thus, in this stanza, we may note that Lord Death has hinted at the goal of both karma, worship, and jnana, knowledge. Briefly, Yama says that the eternal absolute reality is fully symbolized in the word Om. न जायते म्रियते वा विपश्चेन्नायं कुतश्चिन्न बभूव कश्चित् अजो नित्यः शाश्वतोऽयं पुराणः न हन्यते हन्यमाने शरीरे. Verse number 18. The intelligent Atman is not born, nor does he die. He did not spring from anything, and nothing sprang from him. This unborn, eternal, everlasting, ancient is not slain, even when the body is destroyed. Earlier in our discussions, we emphasized how the Kathopanishad mantras were evidently an immediate inspiration to Bhagavan Vyasa to crystallize his matured thinking, all full realization of the truth in his own Upanishad poem, the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. You all know how how in Gita the entire first chapter and portions of the second are spent in providing an inimitable background. Similarly to the story of Nachiketas in this Upanishad, wherein to the presence of an immortal teacher, Lord Krishna, the disciple Sri Arjun, is brought in an attitude of surrender, devotion, and seeking. And in the second chapter of the divine song sung by the Lord Himself, there is a substantial reproduction of even the very words of the mantra that is now under discussion. The last line of this mantra is repeated as such. Chapter 2, Shlok 20. You must all remember that the pointed question of Nachiketas was to explain to him that which Lord Death had experienced himself personally, that eternal factor which is beyond virtue and vice, which is other than cause and effect, and which is other than past or future. During our discussions of the stanza, we clearly found that the aspiring Brahman boy was inquiring after the nature of the ever witnessing spark of awareness. The Atman in this body, Lord Death, in answering him, we also found had first dealt with the symbol of truth, Om. Now, in this stanza, the teacher is directly hinting at the divine spark that presides over the matter envelopments constituting our body, mind, and intellect. Atman is not born nor does it die. All perishable finite things undergo modifications, and the entire set of modifications are classified under five headings, namely birth, growth, disease, decay, and death. In this stanza, we are told that the truth principle gracing our within is without the first and the last of these pentameros modifications, that is, the birth and the death. Naturally, they mean to incorporate within themselves all the other unsaid three modifications also. That which undergoes modifications is a perishable finite quality. In denying modification, the teacher is hinting at the eternal nature of the soul of man. We must note here that the word vipaschit is used for Atman, and it is no accidental usage or meaning blown into it due to the circumstances. It comes from the root whip, to quiver or tremble. Hence its adjective whip inspired. Its noun vipash inspire inspiration. So vipaschit knowing inspiration. Born of the experience of the pure knowledge. The soul is unborn, only the body is born. You must be remembering our preliminary talks when we discussed exhaustively these points in general. And yet, to help you at your recapitulation, we may add here the following. The pot maker makes a pot. The pot is born, but the space is not, being itself eternally one with the outer space, is not created or born. But the space in the pot, being itself eternally one with the outer space, is not created or born. The pot may break, that which is made is perishable, but with the breaking of the pot space is not broken. The unborn pot space knows no death. Similarly, the self or the truth is never born and naturally never dies. The false ego center, through vulgar meditations and ignorant thinking, has molded out a perishable body, mind, intellect, equipment in which the all pervading eternal truth seems to be confined. The body equipment might perish, but not the truth principle. And again, the pot maker did not make a pot and then pour some space into the pot. The pot maker worked in space, and as he molded the pot, he could mold it only with space already inside. Similarly, the body is born in Atman, maintained in Atman, and this truth principle is ever the presiding deity within and without the body during its existence and modifications such as birth, growth, decay, disease, and death. With the above ideas in mind, the second line of the mantra must now stand for out, self-explained. Hanta chen manyate hantugam hataschen manyate hatam ubhau tan vijanito nayam hanti na hanyate. Verse 19. If the slayer thinks I slay, and if the slain thinks I am slain, then both of them do not know well. This slays not, nor is this slain. In the Gita, chapter 2, verse 19-20, we notice that the above mantra, especially its second line, is repeated in developing a parallel thought which amounts to almost an actual borrowing. If a murderer feels that by wounding the body, the Atman is killed, or if the murdered comes to despair at his death bed that his Atman is dying, both of them are under a delusory conception that the body is the soul. The stupidity of such thinking becomes more poignantly apparent to us if we were to say that we have broken the space in the cup when we throw the cup down. This mantra reveals itself its meaning to anyone who has carefully followed our discussion upon the previous mantras. Verse 20. अणोरणीयान् महतो महीयान् आत्मास्य जन्तोर्निहितो गुहायां तमः क्रतुः पश्यति वीतशोको धातुः प्रसादान् महिमानमात्मनः तमः क्रतु. Verse 20. The Atman that is subtler than the subtlest and greater than the greatest is seated in the cavity of heart of each living being. He who is free from willing and wishing, with his mind and senses composed, beholds the majesty of the self and becomes free from sorrow. This is one of the much quoted stanzas, a favorite one with all preachers and philosophic writers. In its charming style of brevity, the mantra hints at a treasure of suggestions, indicating almost directly the Atman, which is the goal of all seekers. By defining the Atman as the smallest of the small, a mere dull intellect might understand that the Atman is not yet seen or discovered because the scientific world has not yet constructed a sufficiently powerful microscope. But to a philosophic mind cultured in the ways of the Shastras, the statement is an ample explanation of the most subtle nature of the Atma Tattva. Had Shruti ended her definition with the above statement alone, it would have denied the volume and girth of things and beings any connection with truth. This probable misunderstanding is negated by the additional epithet that the Atman is also greater than the greatest. Here, the great is meant to cover the entire universe of manifested existence, and truth, according to the Shruti, not only pervades, envelops, and penetrates through the Jagat, but also extends farther than the crores of universes that whirl around in space. This is endorsed. This is endorsed by a similar statement in the Gita, made by the Lord Himself, wherein He says, that is 10:42. The Jagat formed of the entire manifested worlds spread themselves out in their delusions and disturbances are, O Arjun, only a fraction of my real nature. This means that the remaining vast portion of truth is yet in its pure nature, untouched by the play of duality, created by the mysterious jugglery of the mind called Maya. Truth is described here as both the tiniest of the tiny and also the biggest of the big. This means that pure consciousness is an eternal, all pervading essence, and that even the minutest space conceivable is pervaded by this great divine influence. And after these statements, when a Western student reads the description that it is lodged in the heart of all living beings, he becomes baffled, and hence his cry. Kathopanishad is a compilation of floating shlokas that had worn out in their usage even at the time of their compilation. These are but some false evidences to prove anything of this sort about this Upanishad. To say that Katha is a compilation is to tell a lie. Truth is here expressed as residing in the heart only to indicate the point where the individual through meditation ultimately comes to realize it. The Vedantic sadhana of hearing and reflecting culminates in its final fulfillment only through the godly vocation to which man alone is heir, namely meditation. Meditation is the process by which man can rise above from his subjective bondages, the knots of the heart, ignorance, vidya, desire, kama, work, karma, and come to the state of freedom and joy of a God. And this process by which we can realize the ideal of perfection, eternal bliss, indicated by the previous epithet, is hinted at in this stanza. He who is free from willing and wishing akratu is in using this qualification to the seeker who is noted for success. A lot has been said by the Shruti with her suggestive style used in the Upanishads. Akratu has been rendered as desireless by Shankar. Here it does not mean the impotency born out of an indolence, misunderstood as vairagya, and a complete inaction, and the consequent morbidity, glorified in vain as Viveka by the misled Hindus. Shankar clearly points out that it is a natural freedom from desires from external sense or objects which dissipate the energies of the seeker and makes him unfit for the true life's realization. Even the desire for the Supreme may, as an anxiety, destroy the peace and poise of the personality. In the last stage, even this anxiety is renounced when the individual rests in the Supreme as the Supreme will. Thus, by Akratu, the means as well as the goal are indicated. Indeed, the Aryan personality is not satisfied with a mere ideology, however great it may be, if it is not advocated along with a practical system of methods by which one can realize and live that ideology, free from desires. If one through long and arduous practices gains control over one's sense organs and mind, that sacred one shall come to experience the self-effulgent eternal self. Therefore, in his realization of his true identity as the Atman, he goes beyond the destinies of sorrow and pain because they are the destinies of the body and the mind only. As Atman, I am not the body or the mind intellect instrument. The fatigue of the car is not the fatigue of the owner riding in it, and the owner knows full well that he is not his car. With a view to entertaining you all, the Swami may invite you here to a short ramble into the woods of the endless quarrels between non dualism and dualism. Both of them exist on the authority of the Shrutis. Here in the stanza under discussion, we have the phrase Dhatu Prasadat, which is interpreted by the dualist as to mean Lord's grace, Dhatru Prasadat, where Dhatu means the supporter, namely the creator of the universe, which is of course the God principle. Hence, the dualists claim that this Atma Tattva can be realized only when the seeker gets the grace of the blessings of the Dhatu. The same epithet is interpreted by the Advaitins as to mean Dhatu Samprasadat, meaning by the purification of the sense and the mind. Dhatu element. To the non dualists, the outer world of sense objects has an existence only in relation to their corresponding sense organs and the synchronizing machine of a mind behind them. Thus, the same word is explained in two different ways by the two schools of philosophic thinking, both when viewed independently or approached intellectually would seem to overpower us with the strength of their individual arguments and the efficiency of their irresistible logic. Naturally, the lesser folks who have studied these great masters only partially grow fanatical and fight among themselves in support of their beliefs as though they were anointed for that purpose. But to a true seeker who is walking the path and is trying to industriously to live the life divine, the seeming contradictions in the philosophies of Madhva, Ramanuja, and Shankar wither away into a perfect understanding of the different standpoints from which each of them is talking to us. The difficulty arises when the commentators try to discover in the Upanishads scriptural sanction for their pet doctrine of grace. The Vedas accept the doctrine of Devata Priti, the joy of the gods at the proper rituals when a true performer invokes the gods properly. Parallel to this, there is no grace of Atman to descend upon something other than itself. Hence, Shankar is indeed well justified in clearly making it Dhatu Prasadat by the purity of the subtle elements in the seeker, the purified intellect, and the single pointed mind. Tranquility is the atmosphere of grace required for the blessed self communion to take place. The sum total of the efforts put into any piece of work slowly rises in its potency until at last, when it equates with the quantity of power and dynamism required, the work gets accomplished in a glorious success. So too, in the various efforts put in by a seeker in perfecting himself. These practices add on their share to the total pool until at last the cumulative effect of all the practices becomes a divine power by the blessings of which the final achievement is gained. To us, pure Vedantins, living the principles of Vedanta, there can never be any school that opposes us, for wisdom, Vedantins' wisdom can bring its light into any problem and resolve it in the terms of the eternal truth. Verse number 21. आसीनो दूरं व्रजति शयानो याति सर्वतः कस्तं मदामदं देव मदन्यो ज्ञातुमर्हति. Sitting he travels far, lying he goes everywhere. Who else, therefore, save myself, is able to comprehend the God who rejoices and rejoices not? Devsin says here opposite predicates are ascribed to Brahman in such a manner that they mutually cancel one another and serve only to illustrate the impossibility of conceiving Brahman by means of an empirical definition. Though in fact the scriptures pant in their futile attempts to define the absolute, here these epithets not only do a mutual self-cancellation, but in that very act with voiceless earnestness they indicate a greater truth regarding that Madam Devam, that exhilarated yet sober Lord, that energetic yet tranquil self. The indescribable Atma Tattva, when forced to confine itself to the limited meanings of a finite language, the phrases and sentences employed must get blasted out into a jigsaw puzzle like confusing contrariness. It is only the fittest student who has the necessary heart and head that can, through the trellis of the words, peep beyond and actually discover the beauty and the truth that lies beyond. And this becomes fully successful only when the student gets a chance to listen to discourses upon the Shruti mantras from a fit master. Sitting, he goes far. Pure consciousness that seems to preside over faculties in the body is conceived of here as the Atman sitting. But the moment a mental wave vitalized by this truth in us flies from here to Europe to contemplate upon the sunny land of Italy, it seems to meet therein existence or consciousness already present there. In this sense, the Atman is said to be making travels far into distances, though in fact the absolute all pervading truth cannot and will not move. When we say that we are going to the next room, it is a clear indication that we are leaving the spot where we are now and traveling towards a point where now we are not, and where we shall be in time. This moment is possible only when the thing is a limited entity. When it is an all pervading truth, it actually cannot go anywhere, since there is no spot where it is not already. For example, my right hand cannot move into my right hand since my right hand is all pervading in my right hand. No two substances can occupy one and the same place during the same period of time. Is a scientific fact known, applauded, and appreciated by the modern world. Thus, Atman or the life center is a motionless entity but seems to be moving only when it is conditioned by the mind and functioning as its manifestations as though as thought waves. The same idea is repeated for purposes of emphasis and clarification in lying he goes everywhere. The second line of the mantra seems to be a quotation from an arrogant monster of incorrigible vanity and egoism at the peak of an evening's discourse, wherein the listeners were patient enough to encourage his vanity by applauses. Who else, therefore, save me, is able to comprehend the God? Friends, no such egoism is meant here. If Lord Death were so egoistic, he would not have been the master of knowledge and self realization as he was, and naturally not a guru fit for Shruti to bring into her palace as a tutor for her beloved son Nachiketas. The master means to state that one who has gained sufficient control over his mind and intellect through a sincere discipline of self control alone can, through the higher meditations on the nature of truth, reach the cumulative glory of subjectively experiencing the all pervading truth, as described in the above pleasant language of contradictions. If the mind is not pure, the truth realized shall not be the absolute. Like a mirror, truth truly reflects the object in front of it. Mr. Das, if he stands in front of his mirror, in his bath towel, or in his office dress, or in his bridal robe, or even in any fancy dress he chooses to wear, the reflection in the mirror reflects faithfully the same Das in the particular form of dress he has worn. An impure intellect can experience only the solid truth. अशरीरकं शरीरेषु अनवस्थेष्वस्थितं महान्तं विभुमात्मानं मत्वा धीरो न शोचति. Verse 22. The wise man who knows the Atman as bodiless, seated firmly in perishable bodies, great and all pervading, does never grieve. Our wrong understanding that we are the body, mind, intellect, equipment, and that there is no other greater truth in us at all is the gurgling source of all the pains and agonies, diseases and death, despairs and dejections, hopes and desires that befall us. When in the maturity of discrimination, a man with an evolved intellect, the mind, like that of Nachiketas, comes to inquire and know, seek and discover for himself, the Atman within, such a saintly one at the peak of evolution, dwelling in the realm of perfection, comes to identify himself permanently as that truth principle, and thereafter, naturally, he shall know no pain or limitation. This idea is explained here in this mantra. All that man has to do to become God is to renounce totally his egocentric vanity and the satanic murmurings of his own impure mind of uncontrolled devilry, detached from the false. Attach yourself to the truth. Therein lies the true redemption and all successes and achievements. Verse number 23. नायमात्मा प्रवचनेन लभ्यो न मेधया न बहुना श्रुतेन यमेवैष वृणुते तेन लभ्यस्तस्यैष आत्मा विवृणुते तनुगं स्वाम्. This Atman cannot be attained by the study of Vedas, nor by intelligence, nor not by much hearing. It is gained by him who chooses praise to this Atman alone. To him, this Atman reveals its true nature. Mere book knowledge is no knowledge at all. This is the uniform opinion of all the Shrutis known to us. An individual having a fair knowledge of the language technicalities of Sanskrit can discourse endlessly upon the word meanings of the Shruti texts, which in their style adopt the simplest words that language can command. What Shruti denies to such professional temple talkers and men of noise and sound any actual blessings that can be gained from the real knowledge, the subjective experience of which is the theme of the Upanishads, source of all dynamism, Atman and life in us. There are some ignorant Panditas who claim that self realization can be only through an initial memorizing of the sacred texts. Medha means the power of the intellect which specially manifests in its retentive capacity. There are some who can repeat from memory all the four Vedas, and they are honored as Chaturvedi among Panditas. There is a Malabar Brahman who is known to this sadhu who can repeat from memory the entire Bhagavat text with Sridhar's commentary. Many are the Mahatmas who can recapitulate and sing all the mantras in the 10 main Upanishads, often with the texts of the Shankara Bhashyam. Admirable though these achievements may be in the material plane, where we are ready to adore, admire, and appreciate the powers of the intellect, the Shruti here, them as a sheer waste and filthy discharge, a mere memorizing of the stanza, or even cultivating a capacity to discourse upon the mantras shall not take any individual to the goal pointed out by the Shruti. Again, there are some who place an undue importance on merely attending satsangas. Such men are ready to undergo any amount of botheration, undertake any long journey, and however often it need be. Only if they can be in a hall where some discourse is in full swing. And having reached the hall, many of them invariably discover a comfortable corner where, in the diffused light, they can gloriously retire and leaning on a wall or pillar can silently set their minds to race backward towards their homes and friends. Bodily, they sit in the satsang, but mentally and intellectually, they are closed bottles, ever reveling in their own poison contents. This Swami is not exaggerating. There must be at least half a dozen here who have not heard what we have been just now roaring through this deafening microphone. If neither study nor memorizing nor satsang can give us a subjective experience of the reality, does it mean that self realization is an impossibility? The Shruti mantra in its second half asserts that realization is possible, only that we have to pursue the methods advocated by the rishis with sincerity, faith, and consistency. Hence, Shruti says that the aspirant who seeks diligently the Atman, to him the Atman reveals itself. The root vru means to choose, to cover. So vrunute means chooses. The vivrunute means uncovers or reveals. The seeking consists of the slow removal of all the negativities in our physical and psychological makeup, such as caste and class prejudices, vanities of being rich, or preoccupation with the tragedies of our poverty, the selfishness, egoism, hatred, jealousies, greeds and lusts, which in their aggregate constitute the barricade that keeps us away from the land of our own real nature. The details of this gruesome self created mistake by which we have come to sign our own self chosen exile are hinted at in the following stanza. Na virato duscharitan na shanto na samahitah na shantamanaso vapi prajnanenainamapnuyat. 24. But he who has not turned away from bad conduct, whose senses are not subdued, whose mind is not concentrated, whose mind is not pacified, can never obtain this Atman by knowledge. This stanza is to be read along with the previous one, since it seems to be a continuation of the ideas expressed in the earlier one, where the eternal peace and the joy of perfection that accrue with the darshana of the Atman are denied to those who have merely learnt their texts by heart, or to those who can only give long discourses upon them, or again to those who are religiously regular only in reaching the halls of such discourses. Here, Lord Death continues explaining the inner barricades that we, in our ignorance, have raised between ourselves and our own self realization and the consequent joy of Godhood are denied in this mantra to him who has not turned away from acts of adharma, who has not brought his senses under control, whose mind has not therefore gained away tranquility to concentrate, and who has not found in his mind a peace within itself because of its thudding palpitations and anxieties regarding the fruits of its actions. In this mantra, we have all the necessary hints by which we can come to intensify our spiritual sadhana. First of all, the sadhaka must retire from all his activities which are immoral and unethical. Unless one is well grown in his moral and ethical life, no amount of japa or tapa, bale and flower, sandalwood and camphor, temples and churches and mosques can be of any help to him in his spiritual growth. The meaningless cry against the efficiency of religion that we are now so accustomed to hear is all raised perhaps by sincere devotees themselves, who are fathers to some 12 children, who will tell any lie if thereby they can gain even a quarter anna coin, and who can taste the sugar in their cup or milk better only when they have the added satisfaction of scalding a few ants along with their spoons of sugar. Neither are they self controlled, nor are they honest, nor non-violent, and our entire religion rests upon the triple principles of brahmacharya, satyam, and ahimsa. When an individual has lived at least for a time respecting dharma, he has the necessary gate pass to the arena of spiritual practices. Then again, to gain the higher worlds of greater perfections, the aspirant should learn slowly the art of controlling his sense organs from their habits of reveling madly and gushing forth ceaselessly into the backwaters of sorrow breeding sense objects by a pursuit of dharmic actions. An individual comes to limit his activities, and when he gains a certain amount of control over his indriyas, the mind of its own accord grows in its potencies to concentrate and to apply itself with greater vigor and efficiency. Even at this stage, the seeker will not be fully fit for success if he has not disciplined himself to get completely detached from his mental anxieties for the enjoyment of the fruits of his tapascharya, self denial, self denials, and such other methods of subduing the senses. About this, Ranade says, Lord Death, in short, means that there are very few indeed who are such full fledged and sincere seekers. At the same time, a fit candidate for Vedanta path is not a fairy who falls from the sky with morning dew, and who, nestling for a while in the opening buds, falls down with the weight of his own sheer competency. A fit student is pressed out between the diligent urgency felt and the sincerity of pursuit put in, and how rare are such press houses. It was with this idea in mind that Lord Death was compelled to cry earlier in Mantra 21, who else therefore save me is able to comprehend the God. 25. यस्य ब्रह्म च क्षत्रं च उभे भवत ओदनः मृत्योर्यस्योपसेचनं कैत्था वेद यत्र सः इति काठकोपनिषदि प्रथमाध्याये द्वितीयावल्ली. To whom the Brahman and the Kshatriya classes are, as it were, but cooked rice, and death itself is a condiment, curry or pickle, how can one thus know where that Atman is? Thus ends the second value of the first chapter. The supreme reality, which is the self sought by the seekers, is the presiding factor that makes possible the worlds of names and forms to exist and function. Truth envelops all Jagat. The inert and realities, dead shadow, can work themselves out only in a medium of pure consciousness or pure existence. The perceived worlds of names and forms can exist only in existence. This idea is poetically hinted at in this mantra when it says that even the Brahman and the Kshatriya classes, which are considered to be the very best among men, and man is the very roof and crown of things, but are but mere cooked rice to be swallowed and digested with comfort and ease by the Supreme. In short, all the manifested world is but a morsel for him to be digested within a few moments. And to such a Supreme, even the threatening process of death is but a pickle that adds extra taste to its appetite. When such is the might and power of pure consciousness in its absolute nature, the trend is that it is rather difficult for ordinary mortals to realize their identity as the Atman, unless, of course, they are ready to undergo the earlier explained processes of self purification and self perfection. How then realize self intellectually? Scholarship, erudition, study, all these by themselves are in vain. But to the purified, tranquil, collected soul, the Supreme Soul is realizable in intimate experience. All others, irrespective of their position and status, are food for death. Section 3, Tritiya Valli. The parable of the chariot teaching the Adhyatma Yoga, yoking of the individual soul with the Supreme Soul. ऋतं पिबन्तौ सुकृतस्य लोके गुहां प्रविष्टौ परमे परार्धे छायातपो ब्रह्मविदो वदन्ति पञ्चाग्नयो ये च तृणाचिकेताः The two who enjoy the fruits of their good works, being seated in the cavity of the heart, the seat of the Supreme, the knowers of Brahman, call them shadow and light, as also the performer of the five-fold fire. The five fires, Garhapatya, Ahavaniya, Dakshinagni, Sabhya, and Avasatya. Fivefold fires, and those who have propitiated three times the Nachiketa's fire. In this section, we have the famous and immortal metaphor of the chariot explaining the Atman and the body. In the chariot sits the driver and the owner. In the body stays the Paramatman, the self and the Jivatman, the ego, and the entire technique of the Adhyatma Yoga is explained. To introduce these two factors, the Atma, self, and the Jiva, ego, we have here in the very opening stanza of this Valli a declaration unanimously made by all the realized saints of knowledge and endorsed by the faithful householders, Panditas. All of them declare that though the body seems to be controlled and directed by these two factors, one of them is but the shadow replica of the other. The shadow or reflection has no independent existence of its own. It exists only with reference to the light or the illumined object. Desire prompted thoughts arise and fall in waves eternally in their own rhyme and rhythm in the mental lake of an uncultured man animal. In this mad death dance of the rumbling thought waves kicking about their pranks in front of the mind, a composite shadow forms ever trembling and changing. The individual in his extrovertedness, gazing on outwardly, views this shadow and identifies himself with it. The shadow represents the I ego, the samsarin who suffers the mortal agonies of his physical pains, mental tortures, intellectual failures, and spiritual bankruptcy. This shadow is called the Jivatman, and the light that causes it, the I, ego. The God principle in us is called the Paramatman. Rutam, as a noun, it is one of the most significant words in the Vedas and means a little more than mere righteousness. It is something like divine law that connects actions and their fruits. The fruits of actions are enjoyed only by the individual soul, Jivatman, the I, ego. Dual number is here used instead of the singular, hence, the Shruti statement comes to indicate that both the Supreme Soul and the come, individual soul are partners in enjoying the fruits of actions. This should not be understood in its literal word meaning, for Shruti would be thereby contradicting herself. Her incessant declaration, oft repeated and always maintained, that the eternal all full Atman is neither a doer nor an enjoyer. He alone is the illuminator of all doings and enjoyments. And yet, there is in the mantra the usage of the dual number when it says the two enjoy the fruits of their good deeds. This difficulty is solved by Sri Shankaracharya ji in his commentary. He says that the shadow I, ego, has no existence at all without the presence of the light principle, the big I, ego, and so they are coupled together in a general way. Examples of this type of coupling are also seen often in our day to day transactions in life. People are moving on, and although there are conversations indicate them all together collectively as umbrella in a similar sense because of the seeming coexistence of the Jivatman and the Paramatman, the false I and the real I, the delusory enjoyment of the fruits of actions, which in the lot of the Jivatman is coupled with the witnessing eternal light of intelligence, the Paramatman. This is more clearly brought out in Mundakopanishad. Both of them are explained to be seated in the heart where of householders. They too can gain an insight, a vision of the real, the truth. यस्य तुरीजानानामक्षरं ब्रह्म यत्परम् अभयं तितीर्षतां पारं नाचिकेतगं शकेमहि. 2 verse number 2. May we master that Nachiketas fire sacrifice, which is the bridge for those who perform sacrifices, as also that which is the highest immortal Brahman, fearlessly, and the other shore for those who wish to cross the ocean of samsara. These two opening stanzas of this section seem to be latter interpolations as they individually explain two different themes and in themselves do not seem to possess any direct connection with the discussions that are yet to follow in this chapter, but however, there is a connection between these two and what is to follow, inasmuch as the Upanishads, though a product of a revolt against the ritualistic karma portion of the Vedas, they rise from and have an intimate relation with it. Setu, bridge or refuge. The Nachiketa's fire that was discussed before is described here as a bridge that connects this mortal world of ours with the shores of that immortal life in the heavens. This stanza seems to glorify both the goals of karma worship and jnana knowledge. The first part of the mantra asserts that this sacred fire is performed with sincerity, faith, and devotion, as prescribed earlier, can lead the egocentric soul to that realm of consciousness called the heaven, and the duration of existence is in embodiment there being longer than life upon this globe. In a relative sense, it is indeed an immortal life. In the second part of the mantra, there is glorification of the goal reached by a jnani through his meditation upon the nature of the goal and its relationship with the total soul. Altogether, this reads as a prayer by the master and pupil before commencing the elaborate discussions on the special yoga of knowledge. The last line can be read with subject that or that Nachiketas. In the latter sense, Nachiketas becomes the name or symbol of that, the goal of life. 3. आत्मानं रथिनं विद्धि शरीरं रथमेव तु बुद्धिं तु सारथिं विद्धि मनः प्रग्रहमेव च. Know the Atman as the Lord of the chariot, when sits within it, who sits within it, and the body as the chariot. Know the intellect as the charioteer, and the mind as verily the reins. With this stanza, we begin the discussion of an analogy famous in the Hindu philosophical literature, often quoted by authors and orators. Herein we may detect also the exact point in this famous Upanishad, which probably gave all the fiery inspiration necessary for Bhagavan Sri Vyasa to write his famous Upanishad poem, the Gita. The analogy of the chariot is, as such, most picturesquely depicted in the divine song as Gita. Therein we have the picture of a chariot led by the 5 surging horses with Lord Krishna, the Supreme Intelligence, at the charioteer's box, and Arjun, the confused and confounded, sitting in the chariot as the lord of it. On both sides of the chariot stands the armies of the Kauravas and the Pandavas, drawn up in battle array, ready to strike and open their total war. It is at these tense moments, just before the actual war has started, that we have the setting for the great Gita. Arjun despaired at the questions of righteousness and the call of duty, confused in mind and intellect, falls prostrate at the Lord's feet, imploring to him light and guidance, and the Lord, half turning towards Arjun, holding the reins tight and the 5 steers steady, as though smiling, gives out a summary of the truth declared in the various Upanishads. No wonder then that an artist as Sri Vyas was, while trying to express in simpler words the transcendental truth declarations of the Upanishads, has to repeat 10 mantras or parts of mantras from this Upanishad in the Gita. We have already discussed many similar instances of such borrowings, and we shall see later on again many more similar instances. In the analogy of the chariot, the self is the master of the chariot, The pure discriminating intellect is the charioteer. The body of the individual is the chariot, and the reins with which the intellect guides the movements of the body are the mind. It is also noteworthy here that there is a similar comparison in Shvetashvatar Upanishad, chapter 2, verse 9 of Shvetashvatar Upanishad. 4, verse number 4. इंद्रियाणि हयानाहो विषयांगंस्तेषु गोचरान् आत्मेन्द्रियमनोयुक्तं भोक्तेत्याहुर्मनीषिणः. The sense and the instincts, they say, are the horses, and their roads are the sense objects. The wise call him the enjoyer when he is united with the body, the sense, and the mind. Continuing the analogy, the mantra here explains what the horses in the chariot picture stand for. The senses are the horses. Without the sense organs such as the ear, the eyes, the nose, the tongue, and the skin, the body chariot cannot move. It is a well known truth observed in modern psychology that a child born without any of the sense organs is a dead one. We generally observe that a blind man has invariably an extra power of hearing. Rarely do we find in life an individual who is both blind and deaf. And still, more rare are persons, or indeed such men are not, who have neither the eyes, nor the ears, nor the sense of touch. In short, we may have among us an unhappy man who has not one or two sense organs, but rarely indeed do we have one living among us who has at once more than two sense organs missing in him. This is not a strange phenomenon. After all, there is a purpose behind our taking up the bodies and coming here to live this mortal existence. The individual ego centers take their individual embodiments and come to live under a set of circumstances during fixed periods of time to earn the experiences of living that fixed life. The instruments through which we can gain the experiences of the outer world are our five indriyas. If our indriyas are all shut up, the world outside rolls up into nothingness so far as we are concerned. For example, in our deep sleep state, we are not aware of the outer world at all because none of our sense organs functions for us during our deep sleep state. If the eyes are not, the forms are not. With our ears, surely we know we cannot grasp ideas or forms. So too, with every other sense organ, if the organs were not with us, the birth in this life would have been a madman's maddening extravagance, purposeless and idle. Lord, the Creator, is no madman. There is a purpose, definite and sure, in each one's arrival here, be it a worm or be it a king. Since without the sense organs, the purpose of our embodiment is defeated. The law sees to it that no child is born with none of the sense organs, for in that case, the child would be defeating the purpose of its creator. The Shruti here says that the horses that draw the body chariot are the sense organs. The word Indriyas collectively means not only the sense organs but also the organs of actions, and as such, it would be complete only if we translate the term as organs of sense and instincts. The interpretation is according to the fully developed Sankhya and Vedanta philosophy. The first clear reference is to the 10 sense organs is in Prashna Upanishad, which is a later composition than the Kathopanishad. Prashna 4, Mantra 2. There is indeed a masterly thoroughness in the inimitable expressions of the Hindu scriptures. Though they are so brief in their style, they never leave any statement half said. When they have discussed the chariot, the rider, the driver, and the horses, the picture would not have been complete without the explanation of the road on which the horses are to run. The Upanishad says that the sense horses trot on the sense objects. How? The eye can illumine or function only in the realm of form. That is, we can never come to hear with our eyes. So, to the ear, they can perceive only sounds. With the ears, we can never come to see. The tongue can walk only the path of taste, and the skin the road to touch. On the whole, it means that the sense organs, because of which the body exists, each function only in its own field of objects. The wise in the stanza means the sages and saints who have realized in their lives the total perfection which is Godhead, and also those who, in declaring their intuitional experiences, have become the authors of the Upanishads. They declare that the true entity in us, which seems to experience the joys and sorrows of life, is not the Atman, the all witnessing intelligence, but the conditional Atman, the supreme intelligence as conditioned by the body and mind, is the ego center Jiva, which seems to enjoy and suffer the passing circumstances of this evanescent life called the samsara. By thus defining the enjoyer in us, the Shruti is definitely making a differentiation between the two entities in us. One, the truth principle, the non doer and the non enjoyer, and the other, the delusion created ego center, Jiva, which is but a reflection of the supreme intelligence in the mental lake. यस्त्वविज्ञानवान् भवति अयुक्तेन मनसा सदा तस्येन्द्रियाण्यवश्यानि दुष्टाश्वा इव सारथेः. Verse number 5. One who is always of unrestrained mind and devoid of right understanding, his sense organs become uncontrollable, like the vicious horses of a charioteer. Having explained the analogy, if the Shruti were not to expose her intentions in making the analogy, it would have been an idle indulgence in word play. In the style of the Upanishads, brevity is a law, and to use therein even a single alphabet unnecessarily is considered as a great sin. Here, from this mantra on, we have a team of 4 stanzas which, in their contents, express the purpose which was in the mind of the Shruti when she launched out this analogy. In this mantra, an inefficient charioteer allows his reins to be loose, and naturally the sturdy steeds run wild and mad as they list, dashing the chariot into bits and raking the Lord on the roadside. In the language of the analogy, we are to understand that if we allow an indiscriminate intellect to let our minds loose, then the Indriyas, sense organs, running wild among the sense objects, shall rake the body in sensuous excesses. The implication is that if an individual seeker wants to lead a religious life of perfection and hasten his evolution, he has to keep his mind ready with his discriminating intellect and thus guide his mind steady and thus guide the sense horses properly in full restraint and under perfect control. This is hinted at in the following stanza. Verse number 6. यस्तु विज्ञानवान् भवति युक्तेन मनसा सदा तस्येन्द्रियाणि वश्यानि सदश्वा इव सारथेः. But he who has the right understanding and has a mind always controlled, his senses are always controllable as the good horses of the charioteer. Just as an intelligent driver, by the shrewd manipulations of the reins, guides the horses along the road which the master wants to ride through, so too the intelligent seeker must, with his pure intellect, keep his mind in restraint and control, and must thus guide his life through the path of God, without allowing the horses to run wild down the embankments into the muddy fields of reckless pleasures there to break the chariot and end the ride in a tragic wayside crash. Such a sadhak controlling the impulses of the mind with a clean discriminative understanding is called yoked one, yukta, and he is complimented by the wise of the scriptures as a vijnanavan. यस्त्वविज्ञानवान् भवति अमनस्क सदा शुचिः न स तत्पदमाप्नोति संसारं चाधिगच्छति. And he who is devoid of proper understanding, thoughtless, and always impure, never attains that goal and gets into the round of births and deaths. With reference to what we have already discussed, it must be quite clear that the Shruti's intentions are to make the seeker understand that unless he first of all trains himself to live the day to day life intelligently following the course of morality and ethics, he shall not stand any chance of succeeding in the life divine. Shruti is never tired of repeating at every stage the all important fact that spiritual practices cannot produce the total effect of perfection or happiness unless the devotee is ready, first of all, to learn to live a life of truthfulness and perfect self control. One who is not constantly bringing his discriminating understanding in curbing the impulses of his mind is one who is unyoked, ayukta, and the wise laugh at his animalism and note him down as an avidnyanavan. In modern times, we are hearing on all sides, especially among the educated classes, that our sacred religion is empty, hollow, and useless. There are some monstrous book-wise scholars who, in their puffed up vanities, hurl shameless calumnies against this great religion. This sadhu has met personally some of them, and when cornered to explain why they condemned Hinduism, some of them at least seem to come out with a real cause. They say that they had tried bhakti, karma, and other yogas for a long time continuously, but that they were not able to enjoy even a trace of the joy and happiness which the yogas promise as a reward. Such desperados indeed are in themselves a sad commentary upon of Hinduism, the science of self perfection. Even in the Vedic days, when we all know the people lived a much more self controlled life of honesty and goodness, the Shrutis were insisting with extra emphasis upon the need and importance of living a life of perfect self control for every seeker. And our poor seekers living the Broadway life, market dishonesties, black marketing, creeds, and corruptions of every kind, if they do some minutes of japa, etc., how can they come to enjoy the blessings of the absolute perfection? All his kirtanas and bhajanas, japa and tapa, temple going and Brahman feeding are waste of time and money. If the devotee is not prepared to keep his mind always under control and thus ultimately come to control in slow degrees the mad onrush of the sense organs. This famous fact is hinted at here by the Shruti. Those who fail to keep up an intelligent self control upon their own endless sense demands not only fail to climb up the ladder of perfection and thus ultimately reach the supreme Godhead known to us in the scriptures as Tat Padam, that state, but also, says the Shruti, slowly fall in the scale of evolution and thus reach the lower states of animal existence. Man, though he is an animal, is considered as the roof and crown of beings because of his reasoning capacity. He alone is the one animal who can, at each challenge in life, discriminate between the path of the good and the path of the pleasant, and firmly make a bid always to stick to the path of good. When man, in his own accord, refuses the blessings of his powers of discrimination, which his intellect is capable of, he is deliberately flouting his privileges as man. And when one has thus of his own free will chosen to be an animal, certainly nature shall bless him with the sorrows and limitations of the animal beings. Man alone is the glorious heir to the supreme joy arising out of the knowledge achieved, and therefore of the lived perfection. It is the lot of the animals to live, to eat, suffer meekly the gruesome burden of voiceless sorrows, and live a life of delusions and empty joys. The Shruti here clearly points out that the man of no self control not only failed to reach the supreme state of joy and peace, but also fall back into the sorrow pit at the very center of the world of birth and death. Samsaram cha adhigacchati. Verse number 8. यस्तु विज्ञानवान् भवति स मनस्कः सदा शुचिः स तु तत्पदमाप्नोति यस्मात् भूयो न जायते. But he who is intelligent, ever pure, and with the mind controlled, verily reaches that goal from whence none is born again. In the previous stanza, we were told that the tragic end of a man who does not try to control his sense appetite, but like an unintelligent animal, ever lives the life of the sensuous excesses and voluptuous revelries. Had the Upanishad left the statement at that, some of us might have come to despair at the feeling that there is no hope of salvation after having been born for once as a man. For don't we see around, and is it not our own experience, that the sense demands are very powerful and that they are not urges easy to be ignored or controlled? This stanza shows how logical and complete is the style of the rishis, and the style represents the main and their head and heart personalities to us. The stanza under review asserts positively that one who through steady practice has come to have a large share of self control and therefore is naturally ever pure, reaches through degrees of spiritual growth that state of perfection which is eternal and immortal, and from which the yogi who has once reached it never comes back. Yasmad bhuyo na jayate, whence none is born again. A common doubt that often comes to the early sadhak as well as to the uninitiated students is being answered here. During life, nobody can ever remain, even for a moment, without action, and actions have reactions. Thus, at death, there must surely be a fund of reactions yet to be experienced by every ego center. And naturally, the jivas are born again into such embodiments and are placed in such circumstances where they can find the necessary field and the necessary instruments to reap the required reactions. A true devotee, having lived the life of the Upanishads and having thus reached the supreme state Tatpadam, shall not return to this samsaric world of birth and death. Why? And if man were to come back thus to the realm of delusions again, what is the use of his having undergone such an amount of struggles and having practiced so much of self restraint and self control? In what way is he then different from the sensuous, vicious, self indulgent animal man? This doubt generally dabs the enthusiasm of the sadhaka. Kind Shruti here gives the answer that such a one reaches the supreme goal from whence none is born again. The supreme goal is the realization of our identity with the All Soul, the Brahman. With this true identification, the false identification with the mind intellect equipment, the ego sense totally ends. We cannot have the knowledge of the rope and the serpent at one and the same time. So too, we cannot have at once the knowledge of the self and the false delusory identifications with matter called the ego, which is the jiva. Birth and death belong to the ignorance created sense of ego. When the ego has once for ever ended in the knowledge of our real nature, all dreams of birth and death also end. Verse number 9. विज्ञानसारथिर्यस्तु मनः प्रग्रहवान् नरः सोऽध्वनः पारमाप्नोति तद्विष्णोः परमं पदम्. The man who has intelligence for his charioteer and the mind as the well controlled rein, he attains the end of the journey, that supreme place of Vishnu, the all pervading Atman. Concluding the analogy portion, the Shruti states in this stanza that the individual who has allowed his indriyas to function under the dictatorial charge of his pure intellect alone can reach the supreme destination. In our ordinary drives, if the driver be a dead drunken fool, it is obvious that we will not reach our place of appointment. In our life, ordinarily, we are careless and under the instructions of an impure intellect, we run amok among the sense objects, whipped by the lashing strokes of an uncontrolled mind's vicious urges, panting and exhausted, weary and fatigued, emaciated and weak. The so called man of the world lives a life of unrest and disappointment, even though he is housed in a palace, clothed in silk, and rolling in a feather bed. None of the material successes and of sense objects can give such a shattered human personality any taste of the real joy and the godly peace, which are the birthrights of a full grown man. But on the other hand, we find a sage or a saint without any of the sense objects about him, housed under some tree, clothed in rags, rolling on stones, yet withal supremely happy and divinely peaceful. It becomes evident if we just open our eyes and observe these two scenes that the real Shanti is not a product to be concocted from a favorable setting of the sense objects around us. Contentment and inner joy can gurgle up from the bosom of an individual only if he has trained his mind to function under a well disciplined self control. Unless we bring the play of the mind under strict and continuous supervision of an ever vigilant intellectual discrimination in us, we shall not, during our life, progress steadily towards our life's goal, that the temple of peace. The supreme goal is mentioned here as the place of Vishnu. It would be absurd if a student of Vedanta were to understand that the place of Vishnu is the Puranic concept of Vaikuntha. For purpose of explaining the scripture, Vishnu is to be conceived of as one of the trinities, but here the meaning is the all-pervading Vasudeva, the Paramatman. Discussions on the two souls, the individual and the supreme soul, the relation between them and the means by which the individual may yoke himself to the supreme and realize his identity with the eternal are explained through the parable of the chariot. Hari Om. We continue in next video. Om Shri Chinmaya Sadgurave Namaha. Hari Om.